Maharishi, one of his important aphorisms is every state of consciousness has a corresponding state of physiology. And if we're interested in higher states of consciousness, we have to take care of our physiology, and we have to give our physiology the opportunity to experience its full range. And this is a slide we often show in our introductory lectures on Transcendental Meditation, but it's a powerful summation of mind and body of the fourth state of consciousness, transcendental consciousness. The second Yoga Sutra says, Yogas Chitta Vriddhi Nirodha, which means yoga is the transcending of the activity of the mind. Yogas Chitta means consciousness, awareness related to mind's activity, and vritti are the reverberations or the fluctuations of mind. Yogas Chitta Vriddhi Nirodha. Nirodha is going beyond or transcending or settling of the activity of the mind. And this we know from our Brain Research Center. This is the neurophysiology. This is the picture of transcendental consciousness. Alpha 1 coherence, 8 to 10 hertz, 8 to 10 cycles per second, but not in just one place or any one place, all over the brain, especially prefrontal cortex. And I'll tell you in a few minutes why it's 8 to 10 cycles per second is transcendence. We'll see that. So that's the brain. And the physiology is decreased stress hormones, plasma lactate. You see the blue is TM, the red is rest. Decreased respiration rate, significantly decreased respiration rate. Is even deeper than sleep sometimes. And the first PhD at MIU was awarded to Dr. John Kesterson, who discovered the unique pattern of breathing during transcendence. It's called apneustic breathing. And there's just a little reverberation. There's a little bit of breath in and out, but it's almost completely suspended. And Maharishi explains that when you're transcending, you don't need all that oxygen, you don't need all that breath. The metabolic rate is so low. Maharishi explains that the physiology is sustained by cosmic intelligence. So you don't need this gross physical activity. The physiology is sustained in that. And then basal galvanic skin resistance, you probably all know the electrical activity or the palm sweat when a person is stressed, and it's a saline solution and it carries electrical charge better. So when the skin resistance decreases, then the person is more relaxed, the basis of the whole lie detector test. So the whole physiology changes in transcendence, and these are some of the markers. So we're looking at the neurophysiology of enlightenment today. There's our beloved Dr. Travis measuring Gemma, measuring her EEG. So we can measure the activity on the surface of the brain. And we're interested in the whole brain, but for enlightenment, we're particularly interested in prefrontal cortex activity. Prefrontal is the very front of the brain, under the forehead here. And it's responsible for conscious thinking and executive functions. So mainly where you live when you're thinking, especially thinking clearly or analytically, is up here, prefrontal cortex. And those executive functions include the sense of self, very important, huh? The sense of self, ahamkar, holding and manipulating information. It was said that Isaac Newton was the genius that he was because he could hold all parts of a problem mathematically in his awareness at one time. And he could see the whole picture and then come up with a solution. So managing information, prefrontal cortex. Memory and learning, of course, there are areas like the hippocampus on the side of the brain that are responsible for initiating new memories. But memory and learning, especially higher order organization of memory and how you process and categorize things, that's prefrontal. Decision making, abstract thinking. I'm going to go to the webinar today. I registered, but I wanted to watch this movie, but I'm going to go here this webinar. All that kind of thing. Abstract thinking, putting it all together. What is the meaning of life? Prefrontal. Inhibition. Not doing any old thing just because it pops up in our awareness. And cognitive flexibility, a beautiful quality. Cognitive flexibility. I can see this side of it. I can also see this side of it. And let me weigh which is more important, which is more relevant. So guess what? This is Professor Isaac Lubimov of the Moscow Brain Research Institute. He did a world tour for us back in the late 90s after he saw this. He has said he had never seen any kind of brain activity like he saw during Transcendental Meditation. And so on the left, the person is getting their finger stimulated on the left, actually on the left hand, because it's the right side of the brain. You see, here's the nose at the top and the ears on the sides. So this is the primary somatosensory cortex in the brain, and the particular area of touch for those fingers that are being stimulated. So that lights up when a person's fingers are stimulated before meditation. And then during meditation, the person's meditating and they do the same stimulus. And look what happens in the prefrontal cortex and all around the association area. Just when the mind is more settled, more of the brain comes online. And so much things that aren't usually in waking state, this is how much brain is dedicated to an experience, and in transcending or in the direction of transcending, so much more of the brain comes online is the meaning of this. Not that we want to stimulate anything during meditation, but it just shows that the brain is more online. More of the brain is active, but in a quiet way, in a settled way during meditation. You've seen this chart, the comparison of different meditations that Dr. Travis and Dr. Shear, Jonathan Shear, brilliant philosopher, University of, was it Virginia, I think. He was in my faculty years ago. So 3 categories in the literature, 3 categories of meditation: focused attention, concentration type meditations. Mind is very busy, 20 to 50 cycles per second, really focused, and trying to bring the mind back if it wanders, concentration. Open monitoring, like mindfulness type of meditations, some vipassana, theta waves. So the engine is idling, the engine is observing, but still conscious thinking activity is going on. And then automatically self-transcending, alpha 1, 8 to 10 cycles per second, and see the coherence all over the brain. The whole brain is doing, different parts of the brain are doing the same thing together. And that is when the brain, the engine switches off, but it's lively, still lively. So the thinking activity settles down. Yoga Chitta Vriddhi Nirodha. Let's see what, oh, that's pretty good. I was looking at the closed captions. It actually did some Sanskrit there. This is when we're awake inside, but not actively processing. This is the neurophysiology of transcendental consciousness. And this is functional MRI that Fred and others did, where I actually have a dye in the brain and you see in resonance imaging which are active areas and which are quiet areas. And here you see the prefrontal in the orange becomes more active during meditation. And the area of the amygdala, these blue spots, and the brain stem, particularly the reticular activating system, RAS is the gas we learned in neurophysiology in my PhD, and the pons, the active processing and areas that keep the mind alert and keep the body more active in the brainstem here, the pons, the medulla, cerebellum, and in the area of the amygdala, part of the limbic system, the emotional brain. These areas become quiet. And they need to become quiet so the brain can settle, the mind can settle. And here, this area, which is all the executive functions, the higher order thinking, the higher brain, becomes more active in a very natural way during meditation. So the brain changes profoundly during each meditation. And then coherence. You all are very familiar with the concept of coherence. And in this measure, we have the nose at the top and the ears on the sides. And these are electrodes. The dots are electrodes. And when there's a line, it means that those two areas of the brain have coherence. They have similar brain activity, similar brainwave activity. And a light line is a light level of coherence, and a dark line is a stronger level of coherence. And so you see a new TM practitioner is starting to get more coherent. And then 3 months of meditation, see how much tremendous increase in coherence after just 3 months. And this coherence factor has been shown to be responsible for higher moral reasoning, less neuroticism, that's a good thing, self-actualization, and world-class athletes and high-performing CEOs have been shown to have higher order brainwave coherence. And this is pre-post increase in brain function during a motor task by ADHD students. So students with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So here's the control group. And they're doing a motor task. They're actually doing something that's waking. So not so much coherence in the control group. But look at this in the TM group after 3 months of meditation. Tremendous coherence. And in the back of the brain, we know that's the visual processing center. The side of the brain, particularly the left side of the brain, is sound and speech area. The right side of the brain is spatial, and the top of the brain is motor and perceptual areas of the brain. And look at this alpha 1 increase in activity after 3 months. Significant increase in brain alpha 1 coherence, even in activity, which is significant. That's where we're headed. Can we maintain alpha 1 in activity? And then gamma. So increased coherence in all the different parts of processing the brain. Theta wave is monitoring, observing. Alpha is transcendence. Beta is activity. Gamma is really focused attention, like that. So now this shows a change in just that alpha 1 growth in activity. So during TM, a 4-month meditator and an 8-year meditator have very similar alpha 1 coherence, we can see. But during activity with eyes open tasks, the 4-month meditator has much less coherence, alpha 1 coherence, than the 8-year meditator. Their brainwave coherence is very similar to TM during activity. This is Travis from 1991, one of Fred's first major discoveries in our Brain Research Institute. All right, so what's going on here? Yoga is the transcending of the activity of the mind. Yoga's chitta vriddhi nirodha. And this is a picture from Dr. Tony Nady's book, Human Physiology, Expression of Veda and Vedic Literature. And Dr. Nader was able to map the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali on the gyri of the brain. So there are 4 chapters to the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutra is the handbook of yoga, how to culture brainwave coherence, how to use the whole brain. It's the handbook of how to use the brain, how to culture the brain to sustain the state of yoga, transcending. And there are 4 chapters in the Yoga Sutras. There are 4 lobes of the brain, frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal by the temples. And there are 191 Yoga Sutras, and there are the same number of gyri in the brain. And each chapter of the Yoga Sutras has the same number of gyri as that part of the brain. And you can see whether there's longer sutras fit on longer gyri and shorter sutras fit on shorter gyri and like that. It's quite remarkable that every fiber of the brain physiology is an expression of the Veda and Vedic literature. Every fiber of the human physiology is an direct expression of the Veda and Vedic literature. We are made of Veda. And so this is quite remarkable. So listening to or reading the Yoga Sutras will create coherence and integration and unification in the brain. And of course, practice of yoga, particularly transcendental meditation, creates this integrated function of the whole brain. And transcendence requires what? Orderly function of the entire brain all at once. That's what transcendence is. Pure awareness, pure sattva. The name for the brain in Sanskrit, one name for mind is sattva. Pure, unadulterated consciousness, pure bliss consciousness. And that experience requires the whole brain comes online in an orderly way. So that's the experience of yoga, the state of yoga, and it requires orderly functioning of this brain physiology. So Maharishi, in his book, 30 Years Around the Globe, it's only a matter of being it.
Light on cut the right moti.
We need not try to remember it. It is held on by itself because the very mind is infused with it. This is cosmic consciousness. It's only a matter of being it. When the mind, completely saturated with the state of pure being, comes back to live in the world of sensory perception, all things are experienced as before, but not as before. Now the full inner state of being is lived. So what Maharishi means by that is we still experience the senses as we have been, but something is different. And what is different, it says in the Gita, is that we begin to experience pure consciousness as the primary reality, as myself. And everything else becomes a little bit separate from it. We're witnessing, we're seeing, observing everything moving by itself according to the gunas of nature. But we're independent of that. We're that unbounded awareness that becomes the primary reality in cosmic consciousness. And the senses are still there. They're clearer than ever. They're more enjoyable than ever, but we're less attached. We're less attached because we don't identify with the changing. We identify with the absolute, with yoga, state of yoga, samadhi. So, description of cosmic consciousness. How can the mind be established in pure consciousness when it's also engaged in the field of action? The answer is because in this state, the mind has become transformed into bliss consciousness. Being is permanently lived as separate from activity. Then a person realizes that the self is different from the mind, which is engaged with thoughts and desires. It is now his experience, or her experience, that the mind, which had been identified with desires, is mainly identified with the self. This is the growing experience of freedom, enlightenment, samadhi, nirvana, pure consciousness. This is Maharishi's commentary on the Gita. He experiences the desires of the mind as lying outside himself, whereas he or she used to experience himself as completely involved with desires. On the surface of the mind, desires certainly continue, but deep within the mind, they no longer exist, for the depths of the mind are transformed into the nature of the self. All the desires which were present in the mind have been thrown upward, as it were. They have gone to the surface, and within the mind, the finest intellect gains an unshakable, immovable status. So samadhi means steady intellect, immovable status. So this is the description of growing cosmic consciousness. Desires are still there. We still want to wake up. We still like to eat. We still like to be with our friends and family. We want to do good for the world. Those desires are there. But the desires aren't what drives us in a deep level, deep inner calm, deep inner peace, inner stability, inner happiness, unshakable, immovable. And so that's where the freedom comes and the bliss comes. And continuing now, in another quote, now for transcendental consciousness to become permanent, this is what we want, and to coexist with the waking state of consciousness, it's necessary that the two states of the nervous system corresponding to those two states of consciousness should coexist. So the state of the nervous system that's responsible for waking state, which is going to be theta and gamma and other wavewaves, and transcendental consciousness, which is alpha 1, those two states of consciousness should coexist. This is brought about by the mind gaining transcendental consciousness and the waking state of consciousness passing from one to the other. Meditation and action. This gradual and systematic culture of the physical nervous system creates a physiological situation in which the two states of consciousness exist together simultaneously. Maharshi's commentary in the Gita, chapter 4, verse 38. So alternation of rest and activity, silence and dynamism, transcendence and waking, and then the physiology gradually gets accustomed to maintaining both together. So the transcendent can be maintained even in waking state or dreaming or sleeping. Integration of these EEG patterns that characterize sleep and transcending in individuals living enlightenment. So now, Dr. Travis has done research on people who are reporting having pure consciousness 24/7. And here's a couple of experiences. This is the beginning experience, early. Sometimes I wake up around 2:30 or 3 a.m. I start to drift back to sleep, and immediately the sun is up and it's time to start the day. I had no awareness of anything, most particularly no awareness of time passing. So I must have been asleep, but there was no sense of waking up. I was not out like a light. There was no gap in consciousness. It's an extremely simple experience, very easy to miss. So just the dawning of that inner awareness, even during deep sleep. It's not thinking, it's not insomnia, it's awareness, just pure awareness itself, without content, pure being. And now a more mature experience, there's a continuum there. It's not like I go away and come back. It's a subtle thing. It's not like I'm awake, waiting for the body to wake up or whatever. It's me there. It's me there. I don't feel like I'm lost in the experience. That's what I mean by a continuum. It's like the fizzing on top of a soda when you poured it. It's there and it becomes active, so there's something to identify with. But when I'm sleeping, it's like the fizzing goes down. Interesting analogy. So that liveliness of awareness, it's awareness, just awareness. Think of, we're awake now, we're thinking, we're processing, we're hearing and seeing. But just behind that, what's there is this awareness. It's the being aware. That's consciousness. It's that continuum that's been there throughout life. That's consciousness. And the fizzing goes down when we sleep. So now here's the crux of the matter. Done in 1997. So this is typical stage 4 deep sleep. Slow delta waves on the top here, stage 4. Slow delta waves, like 4 cycles per second. You go each second you'll see 4 or 5 waves per second. That's typical deep sleep. Excuse me. Sorry. Now, here we have witnessing sleep, and this is major. In a second, here's a second, you have these slow delta waves, but superimposed, you have these little fizzing, these little bumps. Sorry. And if you count them, there are 8 of these little minor peaks in a second. And why 8? Sorry. Because 8 cycles per second is what?
Alpha.
Alpha 1 coherence. So you can see superimposed on slow delta wave of sleep, deep sleep, you have transcendental consciousness together. Sorry. As far as I know, this is the first scientific verified evidence of transcendental consciousness in the brain, done by Dr. Travis and others. In similar research, alpha 1 power, the amplitude, how much power of the alpha 1 is there during stages 3 and 4 in sleep. And in non-practitioners of TM, it's low, alpha 1 power. In short term, it's medium. And in the witnessing group, it's quite high. The percentage of alpha 1 power.
What was this?
Another brainwave measure of how much coherence, how strong the alpha 1 coherence is during sleep. Now, what's happening in wakefulness is there's thalamocortical looping. The thalamus in the center of the brain is the intellect. It's related to the intellect in Dr. Nader's discovery. It's the discriminating factor that takes all this information from the body and sends it to the right part of the brain. Takes all the information from the brain and sends it back to the right part of the body. And for any conscious experience, you have to have 3 thalamocortical loops. 3 loops. And when the brain is awake but not processing, you have 8 of these loops in a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's actually 8. 8 cycles per second. That's when the brain is awake, conscious,
Mm-hmm.
but not consciously processing. So the yellow indicates wakefulness, and then the blue would indicate content. When you're processing, then there's faster brain waves and more activity in the cortex, more gamma, more theta, more other brain waves. But transcending is just the brain is awake, but not processing. It's just wakefulness itself. 8 cycles per second. Thalamocortical loops. So here's pure consciousness without processing, no blue there, just wakefulness. When we transcend, these are the 8 cycles per second. I think he's got it. Okay. Now, if we can maintain that functioning of the brain, thalamocortical wakefulness, when sleep is happening, then you'll get the 8 cycles per second, plus the delta waves of sleep, which are delta waves generated in the cortex, layers 2, 3, 5, and 6. There's 6 layers of the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is very thin, but they have specific layers, specific different types of brain cells in each layer with different functions. And 2, 3, 5, and 6 pretty much have to they have to shut down. The theater has to shut down. The screen is still there, but they turn off the projector. But now we see in deep sleep, these areas of the cortex are doing their things. There's the slow delta waves, but yet the wakefulness, the 8 cycles per second, is also there, maintained. That's witnessing sleep. That is the scientific measurement of cosmic consciousness. So another experience now, witnessing waking is another phase. And here's an experience. It's the I amness. It's my being. There's just a channel underneath that's just underlying everything. It's my essence there. And it just doesn't stop where I stop. By I mean this 5'2" person that moves around here and there. So awareness is the continuum, and the movement is taking place, but the awareness never goes. It's like the movie screen is seen even while the movie's going on. So now Dr. Travis has seen that students quickly master transcending. So after 6 months of practice, the brainwave alpha 1 coherence is very strong after 6 months. And same after 24 years. Very strong alpha 1 coherence in meditation. This is in meditation. But during waking outside, you see the alpha 1 is not so much in a 6-month meditator, but it's quite strong in a 24-year meditator. So that's another indication that that alpha 1 power and coherence is increased in waking, another measure of cosmic consciousness. Coherence during activity after TM. So the coherence with eyes closed, not so much, and then greatly increases with TM practice. And then eyes open during a reaction time test. And this is time after meditation. So this is learning baseline, and 2 months, 6 months, and 12 months after learning meditation. So you see the coherence, eyes open, significantly increases in the meditators after 6 months and to a year. Okay, that's baseline, and then 2 months, and then 6 and 12 months. All right, so how do we accelerate this growth of consciousness? We practice all 8 limbs of yoga. This is the technology that Maharishi's given us to quickly stabilize the state of yoga, transcendental consciousness, in activity and in sleep. And these are the 8 limbs of yoga. I'm just going to outline them today, but in our next talk for this group, we'll go into some details of the 8 limbs of yoga. It's a very fascinating study from Maharishi Patanjali and Maharishi's commentary on that. So there'll be another talk later on. So the 8 limbs of yoga are yama, 5 observances. And this is the area of cosmic life. We observe cosmic natural law. It's truth, satya, ahimsa, non-violence, asteya, non-covetousness, and brahmachari, pure lifestyle. And there are 5 values of cosmic life that are observed in the cosmos and also impacting how the cosmos impacts us individually and how we can impact the cosmos. Everything we think and do impacts the cosmos. So there are 5 yamas. The 5 niyamas are codes of contact. This is the area of individual behavior, which is shauch, santosh, tapas, purification, contentment, and those kinds of things. Tapas, retiring from the senses, all those things we'll go through next time. Asana. Asana means seat or posture, but ultimately asana means seated in oneself. So asana is that aspect of yoga that cultures the physiology so one can comfortably be seated in the self. Pranayama is regulation of the life breath. Prana is the life breath. Prana is reverberating consciousness. And these simple breathing exercises, Maharishi gave us supranayama to refine the breath, culture and refine the respiratory system, and actually create a perfect and balanced flow of prana throughout the whole physiology, which lengthens life and helps culture the physiology to sustain that finer breath, sustains that finer awareness. Pratyahara is coming out of the sensory field of experience. Ahara means food. Pratyahara means allowing the attention to go inward. We actually gain more nourishment inside than we do through the senses because it's increasingly charming as we transcend. So we gain nourishment from inside. Dharana is steadiness of mind. Dharana means when the mind becomes settled, we just close our eyes and pick up the mantra, and instantly, because it's increasing charm, The mind gathers in that inward direction and becomes more steady. Dhyana is the flow of the mind, sometimes defined as meditation. The mind experiences conscious thinking level and then finer level of thought, and then finer level of thought, and then finer thought. This is the flow of the mind to the levels of increasing charm. And then samadhi is transcendence, steady intellect, the most charming, that unbounded awareness, pure bliss consciousness beyond time and space, wholeness, infinity, pure, steady intellect. Intellect can't reach there, but the intellect becomes steadfast at the doorstep of the transcendent. And so this is samadhi, beyond thought. And that's the self. That's yourself, myself, the self of everyone. So, sorry for my voice. Physiology of immortality. Now, here's a discussion from Maharshi. Now, here's the cause of short span of life in Kali Yuga and long, long lifespan in Sat Yuga, of life in Sat Yuga. This is related to the degree of enlightenment. When the knower enjoys a greater degree of self-referral consciousness, the absorption of the senses and the objects will be less. Then less improperly metabolized material is there to be digested by the digestive system. That means the digestive system will be less exposed to stress and strain. With the digestive system remaining more efficient, the fundamentals of physiology will be protected from wear and tear. Physiology will last longer and not give up functioning. So more self-referral, then we're not so absorbed in the objects, and everything is much softer. The metabolism, the digestion of our experience, metabolism of experience becomes much softer and less wear and tear. This is why Maharishi Vedic approach to health focuses to such a large extent on diet. This is from the diet course. Diet should not be understood to be only what one takes in through the mouth, but it should extend to mean all that we take in from any field of perception, through any sense of perception, any sense of action, any mode of mind, in any mode of intellect. So all our experience has to be metabolized. This means the self should be the primary object of perception. Then this perception, by self-referral perception, will promote a self-referral theme of digestion, where each dhatu and each agni will be functioning from its self-referral level, from its full potential level. The dhatus and agnis together, functioning from the self-referral level, will render life immortal. So beautiful. So the whole physiology processes all of our experience, not the brain, but all the agnis and the dhatus, everything. But if we're established in self-referral, then everything is functioning to the highest pitch of balance and perfection. Natural perception. To make the perception on the sensory level easy to metabolize, the procedure is to develop self-awareness, self-referral consciousness. Then very naturally, the reality of what one experiences through the senses will naturally loosen the hardness of perception, will loosen ati, or excessive exposure. So development is from within and not from trying to discipline the senses from outside. Maharishi's course on diet, digestion, and nutrition. So this is how we can perceive everything and not create wear and tear in the body. In fact, stimulate bliss, metabolize every experience into bliss by culturing that ability to maintain self-awareness. So in conclusion, experiences of higher states are innate in the brain physiology. We are wired for enlightenment. And there are 7 states of consciousness, and our birthright is to live the highest state, unity consciousness. We only need to systematically develop these circuits through alternating the experience of pure consciousness and normal waking activity. Okay, I talked a while. Let's have a discussion. Let's have questions. Any thoughts, perceptions, questions? Michelle wants to know how we can take the diet and nutrition course. We should record it, Carol. We should do that. It's part of the undergraduate program in Ayurveda at the university. Otherwise, it's not widely taught. But you get almost all of it in the bachelor's and master's in Maharishi Ayurveda. And we have the online pulse course and the online yoga asana course, but we don't have an online diet course. Maybe we should do that. It has a lot of overlap with the pulse course, same three doshas and things, but more focus on the diet and digestion.
There are also some, any speaker that we've had, I've posted the recording on ayurvedapartner.com. So I could have sworn we had one on diet and nutrition already. But if you go to ayurvedapartner.com, you look for the link that says recorded webinars,
Yeah.
you see the past recordings. But Mark Edwards, Dr. Mark Edwards did a talk, and that might be the one that didn't record properly. So forgive me, that one's not there. But
I have
if we didn't, we'll do another one. So
I have five of these Ayurveda tips for busy people, Carol. I've done 5 on the diet and digestion, so you'll have 5 recordings in this format very soon.
nice. Okay. Well, then we'll get that on the site. For anybody that joined late, I apologize. I forgot to remind everybody that Fairfield went through, and most of America went through daylight savings time, and Europe is 2 weeks behind us. So those of you that joined an hour late going, wait, how come we're so deep into the recording already? If you're dialing in from Europe, your time zone changes 2 weeks after America goes into daylight savings time, most of America. So we still have some rebel states that don't do the time change. Mercedes has a question, Dr. Paul.
Yes, please, Mercedes.
Hello, Jaeger
Hello,
Dad. Yes,
Jaeger
so
Day.
my question is, well, I am a Maharishi Ayurveda consultant in Latin America.
Beautiful.
I have a patient that he had a mole on the left side of the brain. And then and I work sometimes with Dr. Manohar, and he recommended a massage with certain oils on the frontal area around the brain and the lower part. And what I noticed, he gets this massage for 20 minutes a day, and then the mole disappear. So what does the mole have to do with the brain coherence? And then he has dementia, but his dementia has stopped thanks to all the herbs that Dr. Manohar has recommended, and also thanks to the massage. And then there is an asika that he also has to do twice a day. So, but my curiosity is that about the mole on the why do if the mole has to do something with coherence, because he's not better, but his dementia has kind of stopped with all the things that he has been doing, or that the care has been providing to him. So, but I was curious, how does the mole disappear? Because, well, the oils are Mahanarayana oil. I don't remember right now the name of the oil, Brahmi oil, many, yes. So, can you explain that? Or I am just curious. So,
Yes, great and great advice from Vajji. Beautiful, and congratulations on the experience. So the brain is called Mashtik in Ayurveda, and the brain is a special aspect of Majjadhatu. You know Majjadhatu, Rasrakma. Majjadhatu, everything's encased in bone. So Majjadhatu is a tridoshic dhatu. It's a very special, very deep tissue in the body. And we just looked at it, the brain physiology. Very special. And it has a lot of kapha components. You know, the myelin sheath, there's a lot of lubrication there required to sustain and nourish the brain and soften the brain. And then there's the nerve themselves with the action potential, and that flow of the brain impulses and nerve impulses are part of vata. So we have kata, pitta, and of course the vascular flow, the blood flow in the brain, the pitta aspect of the brain, very essential. And then intellect is pitta. So the brain has all the doshas, and Maja Dhatu itself is more tridoshic. And so if you get a growth in the brain, its growths are usually due to kapha, but if it's a mole type, I hadn't heard of moles in the brain, so I can't really comment physiologically, but moles are usually more pitta. So some disturbance in vata, pitta and kapha in the brain that's creating some change in the quality of the dhatu, change in the quality of the structure of the dhatu. Now, brain's function is vata. In an elderly person, vata age, the brain can shrink if vata and kapha decreases and vata increases, and the brain can shrink and the structure becomes compromised, the dhatu becomes compromised due to primarily vata things. So oil, we know, is the best medium for pacifying vata. And then these powerful herbs, Mahanarayana, balance all the doshas, but particularly working on balancing, nourishing the brain, balancing the brain. So the growth may be a disturbance in kapha, but it may be related to vata also. So we have to see on the pulse to really know the situation with the doshas. But then there are these special herbs called Medhya Rasayanas, like Brahmi, like Godakola, Lashankapushpi, Jadamamsi, Indian valerian. Licorice is also one. These great rasayanas, which actually have been shown to increase the growth of dendrites and to strengthen the neurons in the brain. Brahmi, in particular, as research shows, it actually strengthens the neurons of the brain. So taking these rasayanas they have a special affinity to enlivening the brain physiology and the intellect also, Didriti and Smriti. So it's wonderful. In Ayurveda, nature has got this nature's pharmacy, these herbs that really can affect the brain, the Medhya Rasayanas. So in all the MAPI products, Mind Plus, Stress-Free Mind, Worry-Free, all these Worry-Free Tea, all these wonderful, they have these Medhya Rasayanas which enliven the structure and function of the brain. And so it's very special. Now, of course, coherence in the brain depends on many things. Regular transcending is the main thing, but stress greatly impacts the ojas and the functioning of the brain. And also in dementia, I guess vata and depletion of the tissues can affect the brain. So many things can affect the brain. But coherence is only when the brain is functioning more normally. But a growth here and there in the brain, I've had friends, even with cancer and brain cancer, and they can still transcend clearly, but other processes, and it depends on where in the brain also. You know, you've got the visual cortex, and you've got the auditory cortex, and you've got the sensory cortex, and the motor cortex, and the association areas, and the prefrontal cortex. So when a person has a stroke or some damage to the brain, it depends on where in the brain that happens. But dementia is typically an overall reduction in the brain function, and the coherence will typically reduce, and certain parts of the brain, like the memory centers and so forth, will start to dissipate, start to dissolve, start to not function as well. It's one of these diseases of aging, particularly when vata time of life. So congratulations on his success, and we're wishing all the best to all of your clients, and so glad you're practicing Maharishi Ayurveda there. Well done.
Thank
a
you
long
very
answer.
much.
I have a story for you. I was telling about Russia. I meant to tell. Remember the hidden reserves of the brain slide when stimulating the finger, the more the brain was involved? Dr. Blumhoff in Moscow. A friend of mine, Henry, was teaching TM in Moscow. In the late 90s, there was this explosion of TM in Russia. And people it was like they were thirsting for something more. And a friend of mine, Henry, was teaching there. And he finished an evening meeting, and he's walking home from the meeting, and he has to walk by the KGB headquarters in Moscow. And as he's walking by the KGB headquarters, these two big burly guys, and it's very dark. And these two big guys come and start to approach him. He says, "Oh, I don't know, Henry, is this the way it all ends?" He's a little concerned. He's in the dark of the night in this dark street, and two KGB officers are walking up to him. And so he's standing there apprehensively. And one of them says, "Mr. Clark, would you please check our meditation?" And it was completely the opposite of what he was expecting. I said, "Oh, yes, of course. Let's do it tomorrow. Name the time." It was a great story. But we were just teaching hundreds and hundreds of people in many parts of Russia, particularly Moscow. For a while there was an opening at that time. And a number of my friends were teaching there. And the Russian people were just thirsting for knowledge. It was quite, anyway, that's my Russia story. I haven't been there, but okay, any other questions or comments? It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
I don't see any more in the chat. Oh, wait a minute. Is there a discounted TM program for vets? I think there is, Nancy, but you have to contact your TM organization for information on that.
Yes. The David Lynch Foundation has a big program for veterans, and Dr. Nidich, Sandy Nidich, our researcher, who's Carol's PhD advisor, has done a seminal study on the effect of reduction of PTSD symptoms in veterans, and we applied for big research in this area for veterans. And so it depends on the funding, if David Lynch Foundation has funding. There is some reduced course fee for people according to income, always. So where there's a will, there's a way. The person should just come. You could check with the David Lynch Foundation, and of course, as Carol mentioned, with your TM Center, and they can tell you the latest. I'm not up to date on all of that. But yes.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. My cousin is a vet and she does suffer from PTSD.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I keep trying to tell her, like, she uses therapy and things like that, but I keep telling her, listen, you've got to try this TM. You know, I had to learn it to start college, and it's just, it's life-changing.
Great.
You can also reach out to Dr. Nidich at MIU and see, because we have PhD students that are doing studies, and we've got quite a few PhD students. If there is a PhD student who's doing a study on PTSD with veterans, and there might be, then they wouldn't pay for their TM. The TM would be covered through the study. So
wonderful.
I don't know offhand if he's got anybody. And now they'd have to obviously participate in the study, which means they got to fill out forms and they've got to meditate regularly and all of that. But do you know, I don't know offhand if we have anybody doing TM and PTSD, but it's pretty common. So we might have. There's 26 PhD students right now in the program, and about 10 more coming in the fall. So that would be another way to get free TM if somebody's doing a study on TM.
Great information. Thank you. I will definitely look into it.
And I'll drop his email into the chat. He's a very busy man, so if he doesn't answer right away, that's why. He also doesn't always read his MIU email. Actually, I should give you his Gmail address because he reads that one more often than he does his. Let me find his Gmail address while we're
Okay.
Now, one final thing I'd like to mention. I'm inspired. I see Amrita Srivastavi here with us. She is an advanced technique teacher for Transcendental Meditation. If one has an interest in accelerating this whole process we discussed this morning, then the 4 advanced techniques of Transcendental Meditation are the way to go. And even if you have the TM City program, which is the ultimate in advanced technologies of Maharishi, if you haven't got all 4 advanced techniques, it's still extremely worthwhile to get the advanced techniques. So check with your TM center, check with Amrita and the advanced technique teachers that are touring the country that are available. And of course, they're always available at MIU if you want to come visit us at MIU, and of course in other countries as well. But there's always a way to accelerate. And next talk, we'll talk about the 8 limbs of yoga, and I'll give you some specific recommendations for specific yoga asanas and their benefits. And we'll have some fun with that whenever Carol invites me back, if she's going to invite me back.
It will be soon. Mark Phelps wants to know if senior citizens have more difficulty transcending due to brain shrinkage.
Good question, Mark. Not necessarily, not at all. Carol's 92-year-old mother is sharp as a tack. And it just depends on that physiology, that person's karma, and what they've done their whole life. And is anyone who can think can meditate, Let's
I
put
want him
it
to define senior now that I'm 66.
that. Right. I'm
And well,
70.
and Dr. Wallace is going to be 80 this year, and Dr.
Uh,
Paul, if you want to admit your age.
I'm 72. I'll be 73
So
and
yeah, what are we defining as senior here? Because I think
you're as young as you feel, right, Carol?
I told someone that I'm still a teenager because I haven't passed that yet. I have to keep doing it over and over again until I pass. Um,
Oh,
but anyway, yeah,
Marcus.
74 marks, 74. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
have trouble transcend. And we were just talking about before the meeting started how sharp my mother is at 92. She's had a very active brain all her life, and she unfortunately had a stroke and fell and can no longer walk. But we were with her 2 weekends ago, and we were. My brother made the comment that his cats only scratch his brown coat. They don't scratch his black coat, and they're identical coats. So my comment was, are cats colorblind? I thought they were. Anyway, he went out to Siri. He asked the question to Siri, and my mother jumped in and said, "Who tested that? How did they, who actually, I mean, how did they figure out that cats they're not colorblind, by the way." So, so we still don't know why his cats only attack his brown coat, not his black coat when they're identical. But anyway, on the chair, they don't attack it on him. They're just scratching it like a scratching post. Anyway, Dr. Paul and I are famous for interjecting stories. Uh, yeah,
Yes, so not necessarily, Mark. It depends on, the state of the brain functioning. But anyone who can think, can meditate, they can follow directions, then it'll be valuable. And there is significant research that shows that coherence, well, we just saw that coherence creates, but also blood flow, particularly prefrontal cortex, but all over the brain. So it can reverse some conditions or help slow the aging process, all of that. Dr. Wallace has lots of research on reversing the aging process with transcending. So yeah.
my
Um,
study was on TM. It's in the publishing stages right now, so hopefully it'll make it through the publishing stages. And but it was on TM and emotional intelligence in medical students in India, so a very stressed out group. So it was emotional intelligence, stress, sleep quality, and fatigue. And it was pretty interesting because the groups were not equal out of the gate, and we were hoping they would be, but they weren't. So one group had an average age of 25 and the other group had an average age of 17. The 25 did not get TM. We would have thought that the average 25-year-olds would have higher level of emotional intelligence, but they actually didn't. The 17-year-olds did, and then the 17-year-olds who meditated for 6 months actually surpassed them in emotional intelligence. All the results were positive across the board for fatigue, sleep quality, emotional intelligence. So I'm looking forward to that article getting through the publishing stages. And if all goes well, I will actually be a PhD by June. So I've got to defend my dissertation. We published the study before I actually did my dissertation. Thank you to everybody who's clapping. It's a long journey. Yeah. The Amrita's in the PhD. Amrita, what's your study on? You want to share?
So mine is understanding the gene expression on people practicing TM and the siddhis, and then comparing it to non-meditators, and then seeing the Maharishi effect around when people were meditating. So it was last year I collected data, the 10,000 group.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating. So Amrita's going to be Dr. Shrivastava, maybe by December of this year, if she gets through her process. So it's a lot. The PhD is hard. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So if you're a student here in the group and you're thinking of doing your PhD, yeah, be ready.
Avanti's ready. Avanti's joining.
Yes, I heard Avanti, you're going into PhD for the fall, right? You're starting in the fall. Yeah. So the PhD program is growing, so there's going to be lots more and more studies on, specifically things related to Maharishi Ayurveda, because that's what the goal of our PhD program is to get more scientific studies out there, more proof for everybody to understand the value of Maharishi Ayurveda. And so, yeah, so it's a wonderful program.
Julie Arna's with us. Thank you, Julie.
Oh, Julie's starting too. Yay, Julie.
And Julie
All
Harrison.
right.
Great. Okay, all these PhDs running around. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you. Hope your brain is more lively today. Enjoy your meditation, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Thanks, Carol,
Thank you,
for the
Dr. Paul, for
opportunity.
joining us. Can't wait till next time. Goodbye, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend.
Take a death.